Okay, we are looking at the standings after 6 weeks or 6 games of a 20-game regular season for my 1977 NBA replay using the old APBA player cards. I've got an explanation of the game on my channel. Look at my channel for a video of that. In the Eastern Conference, Philadelphia and Chicago are up at the top, 5-1. Again, I've got 16 teams, as you can see. Out of the 23 teams, I think, that year in the NBA, 22 or 23, and I drafted players from those other teams that I did not include in my league. I can only play so many games. I've only got so much time, so to keep it more interesting. And so New Orleans, Kansas City, Milwaukee, Indiana, Atlanta, Seattle, all the players from those teams were drafted onto these 16 teams, and I just had a random draft, put them in a Excel spreadsheet and had them draft randomly. On another video I may show that draft. But Philadelphia does not have Julius Erving. He is with the Nets. Again, if you look at my league setup, the video on this channel kind of explains that. I've got the Spirits of St. Louis in this league just to see how they would do in the NBA, and I left Dr. J on the Nets. So Philadelphia and Chicago at top. The Knicks, Detroit, Buffalo, all in logjam there at 3-3. And as you'll see when we do a preview of Week 7 games coming up, Detroit and Buffalo play each other, I believe, at Detroit. So that's going to be a big game. Again, only a 20-game regular season, so every game's important. Washington at 2-4. They expect to be better than that. They had a rough start, lost some games early, and so they're looking to move up in the standings now as the conference play gets going. The first 4 weeks of the season, East played West teams. Now up until Week 13, we just play conference opponents. So really the conference play started with Week 5. The Nets at 2-4. I'm surprised. That's a weaker team. Nate Archibald has been injured, just like he got injured in real life. They do have Dr. J, but it's a weak team around him as he's trying to make his mark in the NBA for the first time. Boston at 1-5, and they just got that victory with a last-second shot by Lou Hudson, who I drafted onto the Celtics from Atlanta. But we'll see that in just a minute. Boston does not have a strong team, despite players like Cowens and Havlicek and JoJo White are all on that team. Not a strong team compared to the other teams in the league. So they're at 1-5. Something of a disappointment, I'm sure, to all the Celtic fans. Western Conference, Houston, a surprise at 5-1. Tom Nisauke has those big front line. He's got Kevin Cunnert and Moses Malone, just over from the ABA. Rudy Tomjanovic, who started off shooting at an incredible rate. Really been a high field goal percentage for Tomjanovic. He also has Rich Kelly and Tom Owens, two players I drafted. They're both just 2-2. Again, all the players are rated from 1 to 5 on offense and defense. So 2-2 is a reserve. But Rich Kelly and Tom Owens have better cards in this league, probably are a little more effective than they would be in real life. Though Owens had a very strong year in Portland, I think in '79, when he replaced Walton, who left. Denver at 5-1. Denver lost their first game in the new NBA to Philadelphia, and then reeled off 5 in a row. They won the last game over Phoenix without David Thompson, who got injured the week before in the Nuggets' thrilling, epic double overtime win over the Los Angeles Lakers. So they're without Thompson last week, and they'll be without him this week as well. Then he'll be back in Week 8. Los Angeles, who Denver beat. Los Angeles was the top of the West with only one loss until the Nuggets won that double overtime game. So they're at 4-2. Portland also at 4-2, and they've been without Bill Walton for 2 weeks and have to be without him for, I think he's back this week. This coming week, Walton is back. He got injured, amazingly enough. His injury row came up on our play chart, just as he got injured in real life. San Antonio at 2-4, huge disappointment to all the ABA and San Antonio fans with the Spurs started off actually 0-4, and they have won their last 2 games. Big win over Golden State last week in week 6. The Warriors were 2-3 and lost to the Spurs in San Antonio. A big game. The Spurs came up big. Golden State at 2-4. Both of those teams expect to do better than that. Very competitive West. Phoenix at 2-4. I picked them near the bottom of the West. They just lost to Denver big. We'll go over that in a minute. But 2-4, they beat St. Louis, as you can see, is winless. And they also, the Suns shocked the whole league in week 1, the season opener, by beating the New York Knicks by about 20 points. The Knicks look to have a much better team, much better player cards than Phoenix. Phoenix is top heavy. Westfall, Boozy. I have Boozy already. I drafted him from Indiana in there. They have high numbers. And Alvin Adams, of course, is very strong. But they are weak after that. So Phoenix at 2-4. St. Louis, and that's one of the impetuses behind this league, is how the Spirits of St. Louis have done in the NBA so far. Though they've been competitive, very competitive in about 3 of those games, they are 0-6. Okay, we're going to scroll on down. So those are the standings of the 16 teams. I should tell you, 5 teams in each conference, a total of 10 teams make the playoffs. I've always done it this way for many years now. This is the 4th or 5th complete season that I have replayed. I've done this 77 season before. I may go over that on some more videos on this channel in the future. But I'm just picking up where I am right now and playing this season. 5 teams from each, so you can see where your cutoff or the battle will be for the playoff spot. So only 20 games. And so in this league, on my tabletop, I can make the NBA more interesting. That's the strength of the NFL, I think, is it only has 16 teams, 1 game a week. So I take that approach here. So a lot of attention, a lot of interest in every single game. And so, okay, here's the Week 7 preview. There's always 8 games each week. Of course, 16 teams. Everybody's playing conference games now, East-East, West-West. The first game is the 1-5 Boston Celtics at the 5-1 Chicago Bulls. And I'll just read the little blurb I have written. Celtics still giddy over the first win of the season in thrilling style, with Lou Hudson's buzzer beater taking down Detroit. That actually happened on my tabletop. I can't plan it. It just happened that way. I did pick Hudson to take the shot. I didn't pick where he got it. It was a guarded shot. If you know about my game, that just means the defense was there. It was a very tough shot. Made it all the more thrilling. Hudson hit the shot to get the Celtics' first win this season. Reality sets in now as Tommy Heinsohn's troops must go to the unfriendly confines of Chicago Stadium to face the 5-1 Bulls. Boston is without Charlie Scott. He got injured last week. Chicago is without Artis Gilmore. Bulls get the short end of that scenario. Sir Charles, that's Charlie Scott, that was his nickname, one of his nicknames then. He's a 4-3, which is fairly high numbers for him. Started in the revamped lineup Heinsohn used against Detroit. Will Havlicek, who played a season-low 12 minutes in the win over the Pistons, start, or will Heinsohn go with the 3-2 veteran Lou Hudson, who was 10 of 10 from the floor, including that buzzer beater last week? Ed Badger's Bulls are looking at the first of 3 games without Gilmore. The Celtics provide the best opportunity of winning sans Artist, as the Knicks and Sixers, you remember from the standings, that's 2 of the better teams in the East, are coming in weeks 8 and 9. Skinny leaper Mickey Johnson will likely start at center, as Scott May will move in beside John Drew at forward. John Drew is who I drafted in the Bulls' first pick from the defunct Atlanta team. Drew's a good scorer. They needed the offensive points. Drew's coming off a 37-point masterpiece against Buffalo last week and is right at home being the main gun for Chicago. He'll be looking to score 50. If you knew anything about John Drew in real life, played for the Atlanta Hawks, he was pretty proud of his scoring ability. Let's look real quick. I won't do this for every game, but here's what the player card matchups will look like. JoJo White, Norm Van Leer. I'm going to start Hondo. John Havlicek, 3-4. Austin Carr is also 3-4. Came from the Cleveland team. Drafted him onto the Chicago team. Dave Cowens, Dave Cowens, Mickey Johnson. Mickey's listed at 6'10", but if you knew him, he was about 6'8" or 6'9", very thin. Great rebounder, though. Curtis Rowe is kind of overplayed his. This will be the last year he plays so well, but he has been a scorer for Boston. Didn't start him at the first of the year. I was starting Campy Russell there in that spot, whom I drafted out of Cleveland on this Boston team. As you can see, if you go down to 16 teams with player cards from 23 teams, they're a little deeper. Curtis Rowe and Sidney Wicks, UCLA teammates, against John Drew. Scott Mays, reserve, although he's got starter numbers at 3 and 4. He moves in to play forward now for the Chicago Bulls. So that's what that one looks like. As I put these cards up, we'll start reading about 5-1 Denver Nuggets at the 2-4 Golden State Warriors. Nuggets coming off a jaw-dropping 47-point win over the Phoenix Suns. That was shocking. It was by that margin because Denver was without their star David Thompson, who got injured. Injuries have really started adding up. David's out a couple of games, I think. The Skywalker will be grounded in this one as well, and the Warriors pose a much more difficult task than Phoenix did. Denver starters are well rested, though, as Larry Brown, the Denver coach, played everyone in uniform significant minutes in the Phoenix blowout. Dan Issel, after scoring 48 in a double overtime win against the Lakers in Week 5, Thompson got injured sometime in the third or fourth quarter. It was Aloran Issel. Saw only 16 minutes last week. They didn't need him because they were blowing Phoenix out. And Bobby Jones, Teddy McClain, and Scott Wedman were all under 30 minutes. Wedman I drafted from the Kansas City team, of course, onto this Denver team, and that's got a storyline behind it. Wedman is from Colorado. He went to the University of Colorado, and so he was a local native, so very popular in Denver. In real life, of course, Scott never played in Denver. He played at Kansas City most of his career, then end of his career he played for the Celtics, if you remember, in the mid-'80s as a backup forward or guard. He can play either on his card. I had him in the backcourt for the injured Thompson. So pretty good replacement for Thompson, but he's not David Thompson. David Thompson's got a great card in this league. The Warriors continue their ABA tour, having faced San Antonio last week, and they lost 122-110. Al Atlas gets Clifford Ray back, which will help Golden State's front court depth considerably, with Robert Parrish and Paul Griffin. Parrish had 16 points last week, Griffin 18, are both now available as reserve. Paul Griffin, 2 and 3, had a high field goal percentage, and so the reality is a little different in this game. Griffin's has a bigger contribution. He can be a scorer because his field goal percentage is so high. You can have him shoot some more. Parrish, this is the young Parrish, maybe a rookie or second season before he went to. This is a couple of seasons before he went to Boston. So he's a young, but he's got a pretty good shooting card. He's like a 3 and 2. He's got reserve numbers. I'm trying to get out their cards so you can see the teams as I read this. So getting Clifford Ray back, who's the starting center, really helps the depth there for Golden State. And let me find Clifford here because he was injured early in the season. And so where am I? Interesting to see if Rick Barry puts together an offensive game like last week when he shot 10 for 14 from the floor, including 3 for 4 from three-point range for 31 points. By far Barry's best game of the short season. Denver's gone from proving they can compete in the new NBA to threatening to win the West. They're 5-1. Golden State wants nothing to do being 2 and 5, and that's certainly true. Okay, let me now get out these teams, at least the starters, so you can see them. With Bobby Jones, Issel for Denver. Teddy McClain has high numbers for that 77 Denver team. Thompson's injured. Danny Roundfield, that's who I drafted. That's one of my great what-ifs. I always thought if the Nuggets had signed Danny Roundfield, who is my vote for the most underrated player of the 80s from the Atlanta Hawks. He was in Indiana originally was an ABA player. The last year of the ABA, Roundfield came out of Central Michigan. And he was a free agent. Atlanta, who had like the least money of any NBA team, actually signed him the first time they spent some money. And he stayed with them through most of the rest of his career. Was first team all defense for several years in the late 70s, early 80s, I think, as was Bobby Jones. So the Nuggets made two big mistakes. They didn't sign Roundfield, and they traded away Bobby Jones to Philadelphia for George McGinnis in the archetypical bad trade. If they'd kept that team together, I think this front line of Issel, Jones, and Roundfield, I think they could have competed for a title. You surround Issel with some rebounders and shot blockers, as Jones and Roundfield both were huge shot blockers for their size, both of them. And they could both get out and shoot, pass, and get out and guard the perimeter. But anyway, Phil Smith and Teddy McClain. Rick Barry plays guard here. He's got guard on his card. He can play, so he played some that season. He's a 5-5. That's as high as rated as you can get. So those numbers help. But the fact that he shot 10 of 14 from the floor last week against San Antonio is unusual because he doesn't have a superb shooting card. It's decent, but Rick Barry's field goal percentage was probably the mid-40s or 46% or something. So he's not going to have the best shooting card like a Issel or a Thompson. Clifford Ray's back. Big rebounder, not much. You don't want him shooting. Look at all the big high numbers on the shot. He's not much of a shot, but he can rebound, still block a few shots. Jamal Wilkes, and then I drafted Truck Robinson from New Orleans onto this Golden State team for a power forward. Teddy McClain, Wedman. There's Wedman, the Colorado native now. He can play guard, as I said, a 4 and 3, so very solid numbers. He's going to be even better as the years go on. He was a very solid forward for Kansas City. Dan Issel, really good shooting card, draws fouls a lot of 31s, where you hit the shot with the foul and a few 32s. Very strong card. Bobby Jones, who I changed to 4 and 5 instead of 5 and 4, he was the defensive player of the year, so he's got to be a 5 defensively. Some of the highest combination of steals and blocks I've ever seen. That 77 season for Bobby Jones. Both steals, and that's very, very high, both of them. And then Danny Roundfield. So that's what those look like for those cards. I won't take the time to get out the cards for every game, but I did want you to see those. Okay, let's look at now some of the... this is the CBS game. I pick a game in this league. I have a CBS game. This time of the year, just one game a week. You know, the 8 games. So you can imagine the interest. I'll let CBS pick first. And then I have even though ESPN didn't start until about 1979, I don't think did the NBA till maybe 81 or 82. I've got them doing 2 games a week. An East game on Tuesdays. I call it Pro Basketball Tuesday or Tuesday night. And then I have a Friday night out west. And so they do a Western Conference game on Friday night. But this is the CBS game. Houston at Los Angeles. I said biggest game in the West this week. CBS game of the week. Lakers have a chance to move into a tie with the surprising Rockets at 5 and 2. If the Lakers win, both teams will be 5 and 2. And then Denver would be alone at the top if they won over Golden State. Those are all big ifs. Jabbar's having an MVP season, coming off a 47-point performance against St. Louis. But the great goggled one has his work cut out for him, as Nasauki will send Malone, Cunnert, Rich Kelly, and Tom Owens all at Jabbar if necessary. He'll send them in waves. Those of you who like to see big guys battle for rebounds, make sure you tune in to CBS on Sunday. The Lakers' Kermit Washington going up against Houston's Moses Malone. It's a classic power forward battle. Both of those guys very high some of the highest rebound ratings in the league. Moses, I think, is the highest. Kermit's not far behind. The floor may have to be reinforced at the Forum when those two are done. It's Kermit Washington and Moses Malone. Don Ford or Tom Abernathy, who's his reserve, will have to pressure Rudy Tomjanovich, who started this season on an almost historic shooting tear. He's 52 of 82 from the floor for 62%. On another one of these videos, I'll show the stats. I keep stats for every game for the whole league. But the Lakers depend more on one player, Kareem, offensively than any team in the league, with the possible exception of Dr. J with the Nets or Paul Westphal in Phoenix. Kareem must play 38 to 40 minutes and probably score 40 plus for the Lakers to catch Houston. Interesting side note here, Kermit Washington is playing for the Lakers as he did in real life this season. Rudy Tomjanovich at Houston as he did for real life. The next season, of course, Kermit Washington will throw a punch at Rudy Tomjanovich that almost killed Rudy T. If you remember that, Kermit was suspended. The Lakers traded him eventually to Boston, and from there he went to San Diego in '79. So interesting. Rudy T and Kermit both in this little story, and they would meet in real life in unexpected ways later. Okay. The 2-4 Nets at the 5-1 Philadelphia 76ers. Again, this is the 77 season, and all the new ABA players and teams in the league. Everybody's anxious to see how they will do, especially Dr. J was the biggest reason for the merger. Ironic storyline here in that Julius Erving, who is staying on the Nets in our league, played for the Nets opponents this week, Philadelphia, in real-life NBA 76-77. That's what RLNBA is. Nevertheless, the Nets appear overmatched against the top team in the East. George McGinnis' best game of the season last week may actually be bad news for the coach Gene Shue. George may be convinced he should shoot more than his 25 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists gem in the Sixers' thrilling 104-102 win over the Knicks last week. That was the ESPN East game. Great game. Philly's still a better team when McGinnis rebounds. McGinnis is a very high rebound rating, very high, and a high passing rating when he rebounds and passes, while Steve Mix, who's even better in APBA or in this game than he was in real life. Very high field goal percentage for Mix. He gets to the foul line a lot. Steve Mix and Doug Collins do most of the shooting. So the players have personalities and there's storylines going on in the league. It's a big part of what happens in the league. It's almost like I'm writing a book, if you will. But McGinnis shot more than he should. His card, he has a low field goal percentage. He gets to the line a lot, but he misses a lot of free throws. Denver traded with him because he looks so impressive. You know, he was 6'8", could run the floor, was an incredible physical specimen, but the longer he played, the worse he got. And the more he shoots, the more he hurts your team. And his card reflects that, amazingly enough. The absence of Daryl Dawkins, who's injured, he's out until week 12, so to past midseason. And he has a high field goal percentage, Daryl does. He really helps them coming off the bench to score. It's likely going to cost the Sixers some games. It almost did against the Knicks. They only won by a basket. But it won't cost them this one. Philly's 10 points better than the Nets at the Spectrum. All right, 3-3 Buffalo Braves at the 3-3 Pistons. Real quick, up to the standings. If you remember, they are locked up there in the East. Let's say the Knicks happen to lose. Then look at one of those teams can move up into second place in the East. This may be the best game of the week between two teams that are really kind of not much attention on them. May very well be fighting each other for a playoff spot. The big news for the Pistons, 6'10" reserve center forward Leon Douglas will finally be available to play. He has a good card in APBA. High field goal percentage, has some 31s. He hits the shot, gets to the line. I mean, he can miss too, but big rebounder. He's a great reserve. Douglas's availability may make the difference in two very even ball clubs. Now Maurice Lucas, who was traded to this team from St. Louis. He was on the St. Louis team, Maurice Lucas. They traded him because Maurice Lucas and Marvin Barnes could not get along, and that was true in real life. That's the reason St. Louis traded him in the 76 season to the Kentucky Colonels. Maurice Lucas played beside Artis Gilmore after the Colonels sent Dan Issel to Denver. So there's some quick history for you. But Maurice Lucas is from that area up in Detroit. He went to college in Marquette, Michigan. And so that kind of played into it. So the Pistons love Lucas up there. He didn't like to play center, and that was true in real life. And so, you know, he was the only backup they had to Lanier after Leon Douglas got hurt early in the first game. Now Maurice Lucas won't have to worry about playing center in relief. Pistons have done well to go 500 without Douglas essentially all season because he got hurt in the first game. Eric Money becoming a real offensive force with his three-point shooting. Detroit coach Herb Brown, Larry's brother, will have to find more time for Eric. Unfortunately for surprising Buffalo, 3-3 reserve guard Dick Snyder, came from Cleveland, will not be ready to suit up until next week as injuries have really decimated the Braves' backcourt. Starter Randy Smith and reserve Chuck Williams joined Snyder on the injured list. Both of those got hurt, leaving only 4 and 5. Brian Taylor came over from the ABA. That's his highest numbers he'll ever have again. He was in Kansas City the first year in the NBA. 4 and 5 Brian Taylor, 3 and 2 Ernie D. Gregorio, and 2 and 2 Bert Averett from close to my hometown in Kentucky and played for the Colonels as available guards. Still, the Braves' strength remains with their forward pair.